Welcome to Spiritual Ambition, where we tune in to awaken our divine nature and explore the provocative inner force compelling us toward our fullest potential. If you've achieved external success but feel a deeper calling, if you're tired of dimming your light to fit in, and you know there's a more powerful way to live and lead and love, you're in the right place. Host Donna is a best-selling author, modern-day high priestess, and catalyst for personal transformation. Together, we're birthing a new paradigm of loving leadership, integrating our humanity with divine wisdom as our individual awakening serves collective evolution. Here's your host of Spiritual Ambition, Donna Bond.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back, welcome in, welcome if you're here for the first time, welcome if you are scrolling on your social media and you go by and I've gotten your attention. Come in and join us. This is Spiritual Ambition, episode number 23, where women tune in to experience their divine nature. Today, we are going to talk about gaze, the consciousness technology that our world needs now. What if the breakdown that is happening globally isn't just a crisis to survive, but it's humanity's call for a completely new kind of leader? And what if you're being called to answer? We are living through something unprecedented. Old systems are collapsing while something entirely new is trying to emerge. If you've felt called to lead during these times of massive transition, but you wonder if you have the capacity for what's required, this episode reveals how expanded consciousness becomes the training ground for evolutionary leadership. We have a beautiful guest today, Annie L. Browning, who is a licensed clinical social worker, a Master of Divinity, and a doctoral student, who is going to share a tender story with us today about how her world collapsed around the tragic death of her 11-year-old son. And it was through that breakdown that she discovered she could reliably induce expanded states of consciousness that transformed trauma into wisdom. Today, Annie teaches her method, Gaze, this consciousness technology to develop leadership capabilities that our world needs most. So if that has gotten your attention, I invite you to settle in. We are going to call in the light, as we always do here on Spiritual Ambition. And, my intention for you and for the show today, this spiritual truth that underlies everything that we do here, is that consciousness creates reality, not the other way around. So the invitation here is to recognize that every external crisis that we're witnessing, systems collapsing, the environmental breakdown, the technological disruption, that all of it is actually a mirror reflecting humanity's collective consciousness, reaching the limits of its current operating system. We can't solve problems at the level of consciousness that they were created at, which is why the world's breakdown isn't calling for better strategies or smarter tactics or working harder. It's calling for an evolutionary leap in consciousness itself. So with that, let's turn our attention inward for just a moment. Welcome everybody who's here. Debbie, hello. Faye, Jennifer Rose, my heartfelt loving out to you. Blanca, thank you so much for being here, everyone. Just placing our attention on our heart space and calling in your energy from all of the places that it's been out working on your behalf. Just with that beautiful cleansing inhalation. And just letting go, breathing out, dropping off anything that's no longer serving you, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. And as you continue breathing, as you join our hearts of this beautiful community, the community of the Sacred Spiral Network, the community of spiritual ambition, just rest in the loving, in the peace. Remembering there's nothing to fix. There's really nothing to do. Infinite universe, we call ourselves forward into your loving. We ask to be cleared, filled, surrounded, and protected with the clear white light of living love. We ask that any karma, negativity, or imbalance be lifted and transmuted at this time, taken to the highest realms of light and sound, and dispersed back into the nothingness, into this space. We call upon grace and peace and light and upliftment. We call upon creativity and joy, expanded awareness and consciousness. We acknowledge and we welcome only those divine beings of light who love each one of us unconditionally, who work for the divine plan and who work for the light. We welcome only you into our sacred space here today. We ask for your support and assistance in bringing forward healing, revelation, and wisdom of the heart that will resonate most profoundly with each individual here for their highest good and the highest good of all concerned. We are grateful for the opportunity to come together, and for this and more, we say thank you. So be it. Just bringing your awareness back to the room. I hope you're in a safe and comfortable space wherever you are. Before we welcome Annie Browning to the stage with us, we're going to bring the power of our loving collective community and intention to uplift and strengthen those who need it most around the globe. So if someone in your life could benefit from healing grace and divine light, you're invited to share their name with us. You can drop it in the chat, or you can go to spiritualambitionsacredlight.com and you can submit their name into our sacred circle of light, where we hold these individuals with our unified intentions and our loving hearts, creating a gentle wave of healing energy. There is no distance too far when our intentional hearts join together with love and light. Sending kisses out to Paul Bond. If there's anybody that you'd like to send light to, please go ahead and drop their name in the chat. We're sending our intentions out to Betty and Bob, to Celia and Don, to Neil and Christine, to Natasha, Alla, Tracy, Hannah, to Mary and Tony, and to David. And we just close our eyes for a moment, and gently and lovingly and with so much compassion, sending that light. I feel the power. I feel the power of all of you, the power of our hearts together, the power of my guest who is backstage. All right. Well, Annie L. Browning is an intuitive practitioner. She's a spiritual guide. She's a licensed clinical social worker and an ordained minister. She is a doctoral student. And in my words, she is a soul-hearted, compassionate leader walking us into the new world with consciousness technology that she created called Gaze. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Annie Browning to Spiritual Ambition.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you today.
Hi, Annie. Thank you so much for being here. Well, let's start with what so many people are going to find not only surprising, but maybe even shocking, that you discovered you could reliably induce expanded states of consciousness through an unimaginable tragedy. Can you take us to that time in the wake of the grief around the passing of your 11-year-old son and your world collapsing? What actually happened to take you on this bridge to the creation of Gaze?
Yes. Well, again, I want to start with my heartfelt hello to all of you and gratitude to you, Donna, for this opportunity. This is probably a familiar group who is familiar with meditation and mindfulness and other spiritual techniques. And I was familiar as well. I learned to meditate when I was 15. It was something that I turned to in the depth of adolescence as a way of coping with many just common changes at that time. And so I had a strong foundation that I was building upon, so much so that about 8 years ago, in a deep, deep meditation, I heard a voice in my ear that came in and said, "One of your children is going to die." And at that moment, I shattered inside. I literally screamed aloud, "May that not be," and had this moment of catharsis, but also a deep knowing that there was something unfolding in my life that I was getting a window into, and that it was going to set a trajectory, pathway forward. I wrote it down in my journal. I put it away, and I prayed that this would not be one of those intuitive moments that came to pass. And then fast forward 8 years later, we were, I won't go into all the details, but we were an average Thursday evening, walking through a parking lot when our eldest son was hit by a car. And I felt that same shattering open. There are no words to describe the grief and the shattering and the trauma of his passing. And so after that time, what I began to notice in the subsequent months was that I was turning once again to meditation, to enter these very deep states. But there was a difference. I was turning to some different forms that I knew about, but perhaps had not practiced as much, because I didn't want just to kind of be in meditation. I wanted to enter more of an expanded, or sometimes we call it a holotropic or even an altered state, without using any sort of pharmacological interventions, any sort of psychedelics. I wanted to enter that state because I ached. And I feel tears. I know many of you can relate to this. I ached and longed to feel him with me. And I was always sharply intuitive and clairvoyant, so I could feel him. But it's like I wanted to experience him in a way that was truly transcending my mind. So what I began to notice was, as I was in meditation, I was beginning to play with some breath and some movements of my eyes, and some attention focusing techniques. And as I started to use them, and a lot of this was natural. It wasn't like I was setting out to create something, But as I was kind of testing and working with some of these and just noticing how my body was responding, how my mind was responding, what was happening spiritually, he was coming alive. And that was the drive. Like, that was the drive of longing to have that connection with him each and every day, much like you would experience if you were using plant medicine. And so I began using it over and over again. And over time, I embarked on some doctoral work. I began using it with some trusted clients to see whether they were having some similar effects. Long story short, it's led down an entire pathway, which Donna knows me well. I'm pretty sharp in terms of analytic. I can be very analytical and very rational, while also deeply intuitive. I kind of like to bring science and spirituality together. But in my doctoral work, I was actually starting to look at brain scans, and then I was starting to look at EEGs and starting to look at something called FNIRS, which is oxygenation levels. And we won't go into all that. But all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is actually working. This is actually, inducing expanded states for individuals, and they're experiencing healing. They're experiencing transformation. Many were experiencing ancestors and guides and in feeling them in a very real way. And so it moved beyond me into something that was really for the broader world. So I want to say, just before I turn it back to you, Donna, is that, all of us, whether it's tragedy or suffering, or whether in its experience of transformative love, we are always being delivered, the mechanisms and the methods and the information and the wisdom and the intelligence that is meeting exactly what our souls need, often to give our greatest gift to the world. And it's already inside of you. It's already there.
Annie, what is the name of your son?
Yeah. His name is Lewis. And I can feel many of you. You're already connecting with him. So
I know.
I feel him here. So he would be almost 15. Yeah.
And I am just present to the depth of the love between you both. And it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is not on my script.
I know. And I want to say from my mother's heart, oh, I miss him.
I know.
Miss him every day. Mm-hmm.
Does he play a role today in supporting you through what you have created?
Mm-hmm. Oh, how could he not, right? Both Lewis and the multitude of support, that's accessible to all of us. When he was dying, I knew in a moment it was the most transcendent experience of my life, the most painful and the most blissful moment that comes together. Many spiritual traditions talk about awe and awful live at an intersection of one another, and that's how I would describe it. As I watched him transition from this world to the other side, I heard in my ear that part of his departure was for something that was bigger, that was beyond even myself. And I knew in an instant, I sort of said yes within, even though I wasn't aware of it. There was a yes, a surrender, an opening to him leading me and guiding me to being actively part of this process. And he still has been, which is the miracle of this sort of work and what you're offering, Donna, in the world. Is hopefully the invitation for all of us to pay attention, to notice, to those invitations, those calls that are emerging in our life right now. It doesn't always have to be a big catalytic moment of suffering, but sometimes in those micro moments, we know that we're not alone, that we're here for something beyond ourselves, and that we have what we need to actually step into it.
In your presence always is a breath of fresh air. And I'm so excited about Gaze and about what you have created. And I just in this moment want to extend gratitude to Lewis for the role that he played to have this manifest and to be able to bring this forward for the world.
Yes.
For the world.
Yes. Yes.
So, consciousness technology. Tell us what that is.
Sure. As you're saying those two words, you know, my mind says they don't fit together, right?
So does mine.
So,
which is why we're having so much fun here.
I know. You know, so I'm really fascinated by we could call them methods, inductions, techniques, you know, what we can use with our bodies to actually support us to enter these expanded states of consciousness, or whatever words you use. And there's a rich array of information, of actual living intelligence that's available to us when not only do we quiet our mind, but we actually enter states in which our sense of self, our sense of time, our sense of directionality, our sense of place and space begins to distort or change. And that to me is what we would call living technology. It's experiential technology. So in that way, it reminds me technologically, like you're receiving kind of disparate pieces of information that may not seem like they go together. In other words, they're not creating like a distinct pattern at face value. But as we start to live into that kind of intelligence, or receiving that sort of intelligence, especially in expanded states, what we can do is we can create these sort of novel connections where point A and point B that don't seem like they're going to go together start to blend together to actually affect how we live. And I know the words consciousness and technology, it sounds very esoteric. So I want to bring it down into something very concrete and tangible, that you are consciousness technology. It is your body. It is your lived experience. It is your breath. It is the beauty of the mind. It is the expansion of your heart. It is your presence in everyday life. And often we kind of give away lived experience as being less than valid or something that we can't rely on, when really my perception is that the emergent leadership of this paradigm that we are living into is going to be far more embodied, engaged, grounded, and that what we receive in these expanded states will have and does have very real value in the tangible, everyday lived experience. So what we might have said before was an spiritual experience that perhaps remained sort of outside of our everyday life. It wants to blend and come in to how we live. And I'm watching with curiosity technological advancements, what we would call traditional technological advancements. And as I watch them intuitively, like it does feel otherworldly at times, like we are actively receiving information that is beyond ourselves. And the invitation is to apply it and to bring it forward.
Yes, beautiful. I'm hearing the word involution. We have evolution, and involution, right? To bring it down and bring it in.
Yes.
So what is gaze?
Well, gaze stands for generating awareness in zones of emergence. So gaze is all about leaning into the edges of what is emergent through a practice or a protocol. So it is facilitating using some techniques to get you into a state that we would call, again, an expanded state or holotropic or altered. You use different words, even a mystical state. And what that means is that your mind is no longer operating in kind of the business as usual fashion. Literally, your default mode network is powering down. We have reduced and shifting blood flow to certain parts of the brain, and you lose some of that orientation to yourself in space and time. So gaze is a combination of a couple different techniques, and I mentioned them because I was working with them, especially after Lewis died. There's a series of 7 different eye movements that are used in a variety of sequences, and a lot of that is very much based in neuroscience and from my own studies. Then there's a few different breath techniques that people can use based on what's most comfortable for them, and making sure that it feels safe and comfortable for them. And then we're also using some different techniques between kind of where we focus attention and where we start to dilute or expand attention. So it's actually the interplay of all of those techniques that help us essentially override that thinking mind and start to actually move into an expanded state. And going back to emergence, you do start to sense and feel and know and perceive a broader, deeper, wider perception that often goes beyond yourself. Most people see something, hear something, know something, feel something. And of course, it's very archetypal, it's very symbolic, it's very right hemispheric. It often comes through not in the linear, logical, sequential fashion, but I think that's the best way to receive intelligence personally, because then you can start to work with it. You work with metaphors of what's coming through. What does it mean for me? How do I apply this? What am I receiving in terms of that consciousness technology that makes a real difference in how I live? But it's always on the edge of what we know. In gaze, we never stay with just this is what I know in one tight circle of perception. It always goes beyond, which is part of also evoking the unconscious to come forward, which typically happens in a gaze experience.
Because I've had the opportunity to experience gaze in a retreat with you in, where were we? Santa Fe, New Mexico? Is that where we were?
Yes.
You are doing an exceptional job of helping people understand that very intangible, mythical, mystical, metaphoric experience. And then you have figured out a magic way to translate that into real, practical, palpable, day-to-day information people can use in their lives. Can you say a little bit about that before we go into the leadership types and that whole piece of this? But, I think it's so important. I think in the plant medicine world, for example, sometimes people have these exalted experiences, and actually integrating their higher levels of awareness back into their day-to-day life in a useful and practical ways is a piece that's often missed in that community. And I know this only from working with some of my own clients who have valued the spiritual psychology lens and being able to say, gosh, I don't know how I would have folded this back into my life if it weren't for these further discussions and further levels of understanding. So I just wanted to give you the space to share a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's a beautiful question, because we cannot bypass our lived experience, right? We have to bring it down into everyday form for us to make sense of it and to start to work it out in our daily life. So, what you're describing is in gaze and many other methods, you may have a peak experience, and that peak experience, it's often it's ineffable. It's difficult to put it into words. I mean, you can describe it, we talk around it, but to say this is what it is actually counterintuitive to a peak experience. Like the minute you could say, oh, well, this is what I experienced, it's like it vaporizes, right? It's so hard to put it into words. So what we do in terms of integration in gaze is we use a variety of different techniques that many of you are probably very familiar with. Everything from journaling to automatic writing to using especially Jungian psychology to start to interpret symbols and themes, metaphors that are coming forward. But I tell you, the real focus is that after a gaze experience, there's often substantial follow-up. So not only daily practices to do, but the opportunity to connect in communities to actually talk about experience, because this is the magic of what happens is when we're in an expanded state, when we are in these groups together practicing gaze or other methods, there's a group field that starts to form. And there's often synchronicities and serendipities and parallels, and people begin to sync to one another, especially in some of their experiences. So when we take time to actually, after a period of time, talk about our experiences, it's so magical how someone will say, oh, I had the image of, a boat crossing the ocean. Another person will say, I felt like I was immersed in a womb with water around me, right? Well, on the surface, you would say those two, do they go together? I don't know. But when we start to parse them out, we begin to talk about it. We begin to do some application. When we look for where it's showing up in your life, it's amazing how these parallel experiences are actually quite unitive. And there's a field that begins to form between us. So here's the key of what I hope you hear from me is to pay attention. And I know, Donna, you probably say this all the time, so it's not new, but you pay attention to what shows up after these peak experiences, because your psyche and your soul is going to continue to give you all of these little hints along the way, sometimes uncomfortable ones, about like, here's a point of dissonance that doesn't feel so good. Here's a point of congruence where everything feels really aligned and solid. And when you track your experience, especially in the 2 weeks after a peak experience, and you regularly journal and you reflect and you're paying attention to the signs and the symbols, then slowly what happens is you start to weave together meaning. And then there's a question I always ask at the end of gaze. And I encourage people to ask it for about 2 weeks afterward, which is, based on your experience, what do you need to do in the next 24 hours? And what that does is it brings a big experience way down into the narrow, where all of a sudden your world is shrunk to the next 24 hours and one thing to do. And that immediately creates some clarity of sometimes what you don't want to do, but more often, what is calling to you.
Annie, what are the results that you have seen over time with people who are committed to practicing gaze?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an incredible question, one that's close to my heart, because I'm just starting to track some of those results over a year's period of time. So the results vary. They're anything from personal to some really big wow moments. I'll share one. There's an individual who is actually in a startup in San Francisco. So not maybe not the typical person, came with a bit of reticence, but has been practicing gaze regularly. And what's been happening is all of a sudden, all of these serendipities started to happen after each session. I mean, literally like some funding came through. This person is interested in funding right now. The second one, literally a check showed up at the door 2 days later. The third one was all of a sudden a project broke ground. The fourth one was there was this absolutely clarifying conversation that shifted the course of some operations. So I'm giving you kind of a business case scenario, but sometimes I think those are helpful to hear because, it's not just, we'll call it like personal transformation. There was some very real world impact. But over time, these are the 3 outcomes that I've started to measure and track. The first one is, increased psychological flexibility. So the capacity to kind of flex with what is, coming forward in the moment, kind of openness to experience, the ability to stay regulated, even in change. We all need that right now, especially in the super cycle of change that we're in. increased resilience. So again, withstanding or staying present, especially when things are tense, challenging, tight, frenetic, finding that kind of internal, not just grit of I'm going to muscle through, but we're really talking about power on the inside. And the third one that I've been noticing would be around the form of equanimity. So even some detachment, healthy ego detachment, identities or structures or experiences that used to be perhaps fundamental or formational for an individual or even a system, they're starting to shatter and change. And for the good, where perhaps there were some limitations that were so present and now they seem to be naturally falling away. And the gift of gaze, and again, there's many gifts in plant medicine. One of the gifts of gaze is that it's more subtle, it's titrated over time, and also we can retain more of, we all have healthy defense mechanisms that have kept us safe in our life. And I tend to be a pretty big proponent that those have been there for perhaps your whole life, even your past life. And they've been constructed, right, to keep you safe. And I've never been interested in just blowing through someone's defenses. So the gift of gaze, especially over the course of time, is that people can kind of adjust their experience. They can slowly enter these states. They can adjust these states as they go, so that the experience is optimal, healthfully challenging, but optimal at the same time.
As you're speaking, I'm thinking about what gets me out of bed in the morning, and that is the opportunity to embody more of my soul, which is
Yes.
what my work is all about, and what my practice is about, and supporting people in that full integration between their higher self and their human self. As one practices gaze, would you say that is a result that we are growing in presence, and our presence, as it is comprised of the energy of loving, that loving then begins to permeate more of who we are. It's more in our field, not only in our field of awareness and the field of the lens that we look through, but also in our auric field, our energetic field, which then is like getting sent out like a beeper, right, all around us. And it's through this increase in this loving that there's a safety that comes about that dissolves these defense mechanisms or the patterns of our egoic consciousness. Is this all like accurate as I say it?
Yeah, yes. And Donna, I have to say, one of the things I love about talking to you is like, because I'm so embedded in the world of psychology and how you just phrased it, I'm like, we're talking about the same thing, right? And that's the beauty of these conversations, is just some cross-disciplinary ways of approaching these concepts, and finding that it often just affirms for me that we're actually not that far away from one another. We often think we are. So yes, there is definitely some ego disillusionment that's happening. There's a dissolving that starts to occur. Perhaps, even a softening of the ego, where we don't have to just decimate it or try to beat it to death. But there's a loving of the ego that can also invite it to be in the positioning that is best serving us for the soul to bloom and blossom. And all of our work is always coming into wholeness, right? Is moving into wholeness at some level. And I love that there's so many ways to start that spiral over and over and over again.
Yes. So let's talk about the global breakdown and the requirement of expanded consciousness, not for better strategies. Take us through why our current leadership approaches, even the really good ones, aren't sufficient for what's happening now, and these leadership archetypes that you are seeing through the work that you've done with your clients and gays.
Sure. So let me start with saying that I developed some leadership archetypes based on experiences that I was watching in gays. Not just watching, intuitively watching. Sounds very voyeuristic, but I was watching intuitively. And then I was hearing, reporting back from individuals in gays. And so I intuitively sat with them and these archetypes started to come together. And they help us personify, a sense of where we're going in the world. So let me back up and say, Donna, I think you and I would both agree that, we are in the midst of a rapid paradigm shift, a super cycle of change. There's a lot of breakdown happening. And yet in all of that, I feel incredibly hopeful that, yes, it is part of a natural, change cycle in our world, that much needs to fall apart to make space for what wants to emerge and rise. And it's like, the fracturing open that I referenced in the very beginning. There's also that quintessential room for the light to break through in the fracturing open. And I certainly see glimpses of that. And I'll tell you, there's two experiences that I would say give me so much hope. First of all, I'd love to hear from you, Donna, if you hear this a lot. The number of individuals that are flooding in, who are calling, asking for sessions, looking for support in some way, but they all say the same thing. I feel called to something and I don't know what it is. And so what that tells me is there's a universal calling that's rising right now in our midst that many of us are feeling called into what might feel unknown, uncertain, unseen. We don't know where we're going. It's like a wilderness of finding our way. I'm raising my hand because there's many days where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, where am I? And then I hear it over and over again. So it's affirming, right? And then the second piece I want to say, which kind of gets into leadership, is so many individuals are at least reporting to me and from their gaze experiences that they see lines and lines of people spanning the earth, almost like ley lines, holding hands and forming a grid. And I tell you, I cannot tell you the times that this has come unprompted in these deep states. So it tells me that something is stirring. Something is stirring, and that it's
Annie. Yeah. Wow, I haven't actually heard that, but as soon as you say it, I see it. Almost like the Who's down in Whoville.
Exactly. I love it.
Wahoo, wahoo. You couldn't stop them from singing.
I know. I'll let you sing, Donna, not me. But that was beautiful.
Keep going. I don't mean to interrupt you. I get excited about what you're sharing. And I love this term, the super cycle of the breakdown. There's just such an interesting ring to that. And everyone, with myself included, you and I both raising our hands that we're being called to something, but we're not even sure what that is. Mm-hmm. And what I love about this is quite literally part of humanity's evolution, because we are breaking free from the hypnosis, the spell that we have been under, which is layered with all of these stories of not enoughness, or I got to be perfect, or competing with somebody else, the comparison game that we get in. When that has been a conditioned storyline that humanity has lived by, when the truth is every single solitary being on this planet has something to contribute to the whole. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that is what is rising up within all of us.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. And you're naming these archetypes, which you can visit my website and learn more, but just very simply, I believe what they're built upon is some of us are invited to kind of speak into systems from the inside, right? To provide that sort of leadership from within. Some of us are invited to kind of take one little step outside and kind of speak into systems. When I say systems, it could be your family system. It could be your marriage, right? It could be a small system, but to start to lead from just that a little step out, but you're still connected in. And then I believe some people are sort of intended to, I call them the pathway pioneers, to start to live into the emergent future and may feel like you straddle two worlds. I think there will also be so many individuals that will be serving as translators to kind of speak in between worlds of what's falling away and what's slowly emerging, or begin to build new structures behind the scenes, new ways of being, new ways of operating, new ways of even using language, shared story, experience, and start to develop a bit of the language that will pave our way for the future. So it's an invitation. I hope you hear it's an invitation to honor whatever you feel called into right now, and to know that if you don't know what it is, you're probably on the right path, at least in my humble opinion. You are being called forward into a new paradigm. It's okay to be a little bit confused or even just unsure or unclear, and to honor and trust your intuition, and to know that that's what's going to navigate us through this season.
Under all of this, the super, how did you say it again? The super cycle breakdown?
That is, the super cycle of change is from Amy Webb, who's a futurist. The breakdown, I don't think anyone owns that one.
Well, that's what I'm calling it. But underneath all of that, the super cycle of change and the breakdown, and we can look out, all we have to do is flip the news on, and we can see the pain and the devastation that everyone is in everywhere. But somehow underneath that, and even as I speak with you and I tune into your energy, there is an energy of hope. There is an energy of like a reclamation or a rebirthing that is happening, even though we don't know what that looks like. Richard Rudd talks about the future human, and we have these future states of humanity. If I'm watching you and I having this discussion today on spiritual ambition, and I know that I feel this call and I want to have better identification with sort of the role that I'm here to play, where's the best place to learn more about this and where I could educate myself on these different leadership types and maybe find the one that resonates with me?
Sure. So I do have a quiz you can take, and I'll put it in the comments on the YouTube page afterwards. I don't have it right now, but I will make sure you all have it. So you're welcome to take that quiz, which would give you one of 5 leadership types and a little bit of a report about it. But I'll say very simply, aside from learning about it, I would say, going back to consciousness technology, you are the technology. So, we've talked about it the whole time, but you are the expert. And much of what is emerging right now, we look at patterns throughout history, we look at patterns of consciousness, but at the end of the day, I believe we are entering a new cycle, a new season for our humanity. And you are the architects of it. So we are not going to just give away our power to others to tell us what this is going to look like in this paradigm shift. It's an invitation for all of us to move from any part of you that feels sort of complicit or passive, or like you're just observing the changes happening, to actually stepping into them full-hearted and open-minded and with humility that can say, I'm here, I'm showing up, I'm present, I'm engaged. I don't have it all figured out, but there is integrity and there is consciousness that is leading me. And that is where all great mysteries are revealed. And there's so many more that are still unknown, the great mysteries, but that's where we get the information, we get the intelligence that we need to lead it with authenticity. And that always begins with each and every one of us.
Earlier about some of the positive derivatives or benefits of gaze. One of the things that you spoke to was power. And I just heard authentic power, right? This is the power that rises up from inside of us, from our presence, from our soul. This is the higher power that we are connected to, and that holds that higher consciousness and higher perspective that does guide us to see the wholeness of all of humanity and the wholeness of each individual that is the sum of the part, or that make up the sum of the whole, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I love it. One of the segments that we close with here on Spiritual Ambition is called the Celebration of Love's Alchemy. And it's where we take a gentle pause to recognize the extraordinary magic in our everyday life. And so every episode, we celebrate something that might seem ordinary or contrary at first glance, but it holds within it a spark of brilliance. And so when we bring our loving appreciation to whatever that is, we uplift our vibration, sending ripples of good juju, I like to say, out and across the planet. So as alchemists of upliftment, we turn the seemingly mundane into marvels of magnificence. And so today, I'd like to bring our love to this sacred paradox of breakdown. Let's celebrate the moments where everything does fall apart. When the structures that we've built, the identities that we've held, the certainties that we have relied upon suddenly crumble. What if breakdown isn't failure, but it's consciousness knocking on our door with an upgrade, taking the elevator up? Annie, you have shown us the profound paradox at the heart of being human, that the most devastating loss can simultaneously become a portal to expanded awareness. And not because the loss was meant to be, but because consciousness itself is designed to hold all of it. The full paradox, the unbearable grief, and the evolutionary awakening that can both be true all at once. Suffering does transform us, but that doesn't make the pain something that we want to sign up for. This is the sacredness of the both and, that only expanded awareness can hold and can embrace. And every breakdown in our lives carries this same paradox. A relationship ending can be genuinely devastating, heartbreaking, and it can reveal who we're becoming. A career dissolving can feel like a failure and can create space for our true calling. A belief system shattering can be terrifying and be the exact liberation that our soul has been longing for. So the breakdown isn't asking us to give ourselves a spiritual bypass in reframing pain as meaningful or finding a silver lining, even though those things are definitely helpful and they support us and they're useful. It really invites us to expand our consciousness enough to hold the full paradox. Yes, this hurts beyond measure, and it's something is being born through it. Both truths exist. Both truths are honored. And this is what it means to be fully human and fully divine, and to have the sacred capacity to hold what seems unholdable, and to find that our consciousness is vast enough to contain even the uncontainable. And you've done that, Annie, and the technology, the consciousness technology that you've created is walking us into that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, thank you, Donna. Thank you.
If you'd like to learn more about Annie, you can go to annielbrowning.com and you can learn more about gaze. Annie will follow up with dropping the link to her quiz in the comments on YouTube. Please remember to click like and subscribe. You can tune in with us next episode. We have a fascinating woman joining us, and we're going to tiptoe around the quantum field. So that will be very interesting and exciting. I'm going to close our space. Annie, I just have a heartfelt thank you for being here with us today. It's always truly my honor and privilege to be with you.
Thank you, Donna. And thank you to all who have joined live. I can feel your energy and your presence. I am equally blessed by this opportunity.
All right, well, let's all just close our eyes together and remember that as we experience those higher states of consciousness, those expanded states of awareness, it gives us the capacity to get our arms around all of it, all of what is breaking down and all of what is ready to be birthed through us. We are now closing all energetic lines of communication between any of us, closing all open portals, gateways, channels, agreements, and lines of communication between any of us and the spirit world. We are so grateful for the opportunity to come together and do this work. For this and more, we say thank you. We are now closing this episode with love, in love, for love, by love, as love. You're watching Spiritual Ambition, and I'm Donna Bond. Thanks for being with us.